This is John Martinka, and I'm here with my good friend Greg Russell with PRK Livengood attorneys in Bellevue, Washington. And Greg and I have worked together on deals for many, many years. In fact, every year we host the Getting the Deal Done Breakfast Conference at the Bellevue Club, and we've done about a dozen of those, very popular events. So Greg is a business attorney, does a lot of transactions, and is one of my go-to people. And for your knowledge, just even though this is my website and YouTube channel, I'm John Martinka, and I've trademarked the term the escape artist for the work I do helping people escape their jobs in the corporate world and get their own business, or when it's time, escape the business for the next great adventure in life. So Greg, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, John. Glad to be here.
First question. What are you seeing, not buy-sell related, but what are you seeing with your existing clients and how they're surviving or not surviving during the COVID mess?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. Obviously, we're all struggling with that, both in our businesses and personally. I'd say it's kind of like what's going on in most areas of our lives, where about a chunk of our businesses are really struggling, right? So if they're in the hospitality space or restaurants, things like that, they're really struggling. Another group are doing phenomenally well, right? If they're in e-commerce, right, or internet, or they have some kind of a business that seems to have done well in the COVID environment, selling outdoor camping gear, for example, right? A client has done really well doing that. They're doing really well. And then the bulk of them, though, are just kind of struggling to hang in there and I think in their view, muddle through. They got a lot of them applied and got PPP loans that helped with their cash flow. They're worrying about whether they can keep their employees now that it looks like this is stretching out a lot longer than people had hoped originally. And so they're just kind of hoping 2020 goes away. And by this time next year, there's a vaccine, COVID's over, and they can kind of get back to doing real business.
Yeah.
But most of them, pretty much everybody I talked to has said, hey, it's going to be a different world post-COVID, rather from what kind of office space you have, to how you manage your production facilities, to how you market yourself, also how you use technology. There's just a lot of things that have been changing for people that they have to adjust to and make change, adjust their businesses to deal with. Great. So it's definitely challenging.
Yeah. So you already answered my second question about what's doing well. So let's flip it around. The businesses that aren't doing well, that have been hurt. I've coined the term when the pain of rebuilding, which for a lot of these owners will be about the third or fourth time in the last 20 some years, when that pain of rebuilding is greater than the pain of selling for less than you wanted, they're going to sell for less than they wanted. What do you see? What percentage of those do you think are going to hit the market earlier than they might have otherwise?
Yeah, we've got a couple that are already on the market that, the owners are just done, right? I mean, they've worked hard. They're in their 60s probably, right? Sometimes in their early 70s. They've been working a long time. As you said, they've been through several ups and downs, and they're burned out and are ready just to sell and move on to the next phase of their life. And so we have several of those businesses that are in that mode. But I would say that's a smaller number than the others. I think most of the others are feeling like, yeah, this is a struggle. If they see that there's a vision to get through this next year, even if it's a struggle, and then things will get better, that's good. But other businesses, like, we were talking about some event planning businesses. I've got several clients who are event planners. That business is destroyed, right? I mean, there's nothing there anymore. And the question is, are you just going to keep sinking money into it, or should you just close up shop? And those guys, unfortunately, I think are not going to be around. And there's a chunk of restaurants that are not going to make it, unfortunately. And some other kind of businesses that are, not well suited to a virtual world are just not going to survive. And so they don't really have anything to sell at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
So those are going to be tough situations for them.
So what are you seeing in the buy-sell world?
Market has slowed. We had several transactions that were in the hopper pre-COVID, right in kind of February, March, that were going to close in April and May, and most of those got pushed a month or two, but they did close, right? So the deals we had in the hopper were all closed. We are getting new deals. They are businesses that are in areas that are hot, right? So healthcare, for example, or internet or distribution, right? That's involved in helping people, distribute products and services either through Amazon or other similar types of situations. And then some businesses are struggling. Like we had one client with a transaction, right? So they had a professional services business that was looking to sell. The best buyers were going to be strategic buyers, not the private equity firms. And the strategics have all pretty much decided to pull in their horns, right? They're not doing acquisitions right now, except in kind of those little niches like I talked about. So that's been a problem. And then the second thing is the private equity firms, their financing was pretty easy and cheap. It's not easy. It's still cheap, but it's not as easy anymore. And so that's caused valuations to come down a little bit because they can't finance deals as easily as they could, 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've had a deal delay by a few months. And of course, your firm and I have been working on that other one where, they're supposed to close at the end of March and the buyer just couldn't do it. I mean, it made sense that they couldn't do it. And, it's still in discussion, but, things have to get back to some semblance of what it was before, even though the business wasn't off by that much. But you're right about the financing too. That's changing for those kind of buyers.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard right now for a buyer to pull the financing together, given the market.
So, have you seen any changes in deal structures due to what's going on?
Yeah, a little bit. We've seen more seller note, right? Larger portion of the purchase price is becoming a seller note, and even having some kind of cash flow backstops in that seller note, so that if cash flow deteriorates below a certain level, then the seller note can be deferred. Or if it's an SBA deal, of course, they get 2 years automatically deferred, but even after that. So we're seeing more seller note, longer term, more options for deferral of payments if cash flow declines. So kind of more protections for the buyer. And then more earnouts, right? We didn't have a lot. Like if you went back 2 years ago, we had very few earnouts. Now a lot of deals are, more, the compensation is more contingent, so that if the business performs or improves and continues to grow, then you'll get a nice payment. But the buyer's putting more of the risk on the seller, given the uncertainty. That doesn't apply in the hot niches, right? Healthcare and distribution and stuff like that. But in the kind of traditional business, like a manufacturing business or light industrial or professional services, right? That it might be impacted negatively if their customers pull back, right? Like if they're a consulting business or something like that has a group of people, that kind of thing. So
you're right. Earnouts, they have been rare, and they should be rare in normal situations, but this is a good reason to have an earnout, is what's going on. You and I have joked at our events that, the litigators are the ones that love earnouts.
They do, usually, because there's always a piece of litigation at the end of an earnout. So unless it's very carefully drafted, they love. There usually seems to be a dispute over what the correct EBITDA was, or how the business was managed, or that kind of thing. So earnouts are tricky.
Yep. Well, what you just said means unless you've drafted it, then there's no
Right, absolutely.
So has your legal due diligence changed too, because of COVID?
A little bit. I would say that people are spending more time on looking at kind of the depth of relationships with customers and looking into those customers more and what's their stability. So we're just working on a deal right now where one of the customers represents about 10 to 15% of the total revenue for the business. And so the buyer is taking a hard look at that customer, right? And what their economic situation is and how are they being impacted by COVID and future, to see if they can spot any trends, with what's going to happen with them down the road. And so I'd say that's where they're spending a little more time, is looking at that and how they impact. And then the other thing is, what's the business? How is it impacted? Office space, people, how are, if the people are working remotely, how are we going to bring them back? That kind of stuff.
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned to you, but we're selling one business right now, and 100% of their people are remote, work from their houses. That's been the case since the inception of the business. And so that's a really strong selling point, right, for this business, because they've already adapted to the post-COVID world, and it's working really well for them. Whereas other clients and other businesses are still working their way through that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you said, that a 10% customer was really getting scrutiny, because, that's usually about where you start looking at it. But, as you know, as small businesses, a lot of them have a customer that is dominant, not always say 90%, but, a lot of them have 15, 20, 25% with a long-term customer.
Yeah, and I think, those are always looked at, right? And customer concentration issues are concerns. And I think that's probably even more of a concern now, it can be a plus and minus, right? Like, of the pluses, if that particular customer is doing really well, right, in the COVID world, then that's a plus. If that customer is not doing as well, or there's some concern, then that can be a bigger minus than might have been the case pre-COVID.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to ask you one more question. If you have anything else to expand upon you'd like to share, but it's just general question. Are you seeing any buyer clients or seller clients doing things differently than they were doing before, other than deal structures and that type of thing?
Yeah, I think there's two things I am hearing a lot. I was number one, they are surprised how well they're doing working remotely. I think most of especially the clients that are service businesses or distribution, but being able to work remotely and be productive. So it's changing, I think, the dynamic of how people are going to run their businesses going forward, which means there's going to be more investment in technology. So I can see people having, even a normal manufacturing widget business is going to invest more in technology than maybe they had in the past. And then the other big thing is, how do you configure your office space or your locations, right? Because that's a lot different now. Yeah. I think there's going to be, I was talking to some commercial realtors about, office space, and they were arguing that, you're going to need now more space per person, right? Before, you would just jam everybody into a bullpen, and, a lot of the tech companies could put a lot of people in a lot of relatively tight spaces, and that you're not going to be able to do that post-COVID. I don't know that that's true. And so they were arguing that, we're going to, companies still going to need the same amount of office space post-COVID as they did pre, but that's not bearing out in the conversations I'm having with my business clients. They're all looking at reducing their office space. If they have office space, right, they're all looking at reducing that going forward. So that's going to have an interesting impact, right, on the market. Now, manufacturing business can't do that as easily.
No.
But they're going to have to deal with, how do you, going forward, be more sensitive to people's health concerns, right, around just any kind of vaccines and viruses and things like that. Because, COVID happened, but it's going to happen again, right? I mean, people are going to get sick. Other viruses are going to come up. I hate to say it, but 3 or 4 years from now, it's going to come up again, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just going to have to be prepared to deal with that going forward in some fashion, which means more investment maybe in how you manage your work processes. So I think people are thinking a lot harder about how does that work? Can we make investments in some automation, right? And change that either through technology or equipment to allow us to operate more efficiently with less people, which is going to put pressure on the labor market. I think in the Puget Sound area, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I mean, I feel like we're going to move through this pretty well because we have such a strong technology base. Boeing's a problem, of course, because they're having their own problems and issues. But they'll hopefully get through that, and it's going to be several years before they come back. So yeah, I think those are the big things I see is how your workplaces are reconfigured, and then how does that impact your space needs in the long run, and then what investments are you going to make in infrastructure and in technology going forward to keep your business efficient and productive.
Well, thank you, Greg. And to wrap up, this is John Martinka with my good friend Greg Russell with PRK Livengood in Bellevue. So thank you so much for doing this interview, Greg.
You bet. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.